In this video, we're going to go through my personal library. This is Libb Thims, and this might be what's called the main section of the library. Over here we have Elements of Chemistry, Lavoisier, Memoir on Heat, Kinetic Theory of Gases. We have Schopenhauer, partial selection here. Pareto, General Treatise on Sociology. Lange's History of Materialism. We have Peter Bridgman here. Leon Winiarski's Essay on Social Mechanics. Then we have Helm's book on energy. Maurice Harrow's book on thermodynamics and jurisprudence. Some books on chemical thermodynamics here. Here we see Thomas Wallace, Wealth, Energy, and Human Values. Gladwell's The Tipping Point. The Promise of Scientific Humanism by Oliver Reiser. Man on His Nature by Sherrington. Top book right here if you want to understand the difference between life and non-life. Goethe's Elective Affinities. Carl Pearson's Grammar of Science if you want to learn how to speak scientifically without sounding like or questioning the words we use, like living force, or Alfred Latka's Elements of Physical Biology, core book. Scott's Atoms of the Living Flame, A Biosummary of Maxwell. Doloff's Heat, Death, and the Phoenix, top book. Here we see Duheim's Commentaries on the Principles of Chemical Thermodynamics. Mirza Bigg's New Dimensions in Sociology. There's two hardcovers of my Human Chemistry. Carnot's Reflections on the Motive Power of Fire. Rossini here. Zerier's We, Human Chemicals. Fairbairn's Human Chemistry. Hoff's Studies in Chemical Dynamics. We have Willard Gibbs here. Collected works on chemical thermodynamics. Clausius's Mechanical Theory of Heat. This book cost me about $600 15 years ago. Original copy, second edition, translated in English. More Clausius here. Buchner's Force and Matter. The System of Nature. Holbach. Top 10 book of all time. Chemical Thermodynamics. dissertation on elective attractions, thermodynamics and the free energy of chemical substances. This is one of the core books if you want to understand. Go to the affinity tables. We see tables of free energies of formation. So right here we see 2 Hg atoms is positive, which means a natural reaction. It has to be forced by the universe to form. Whereas AgCl is a negative formation energy releasing reaction, which means it forms naturally on the surface of the Earth. So these are called spontaneous reactions, non-spontaneous reactions. And these tables scale upwards to the formation of humans. Or chemical thermodynamics, mathematics of thermodynamics, more chemical thermodynamics, more thermodynamics here, history of thermodynamics, more thermodynamics, sociological thermodynamics. We have economic thermodynamics over here, molecular thermodynamics over here. More system thermodynamics over here. Basic thermodynamic textbooks over here. More thermodynamics over here. We have economic thermodynamics over here. Here we have the Black Athena collection. Alphanumeric and Egyptian origin of the alphabet collection over here. Here we have more origin of the alphabet selection here. Gardner's Egyptian grammar. Here we have books I recently started to print out with respect to linguistics and Egyptology. For example, the Rosetta Stone by Budge, and other books such as Gardner's Semitic Alphabet article, more books on Egyptology, mythology, books on atheism over here, religio-mythology over here, Gerald Massey, Dorothy Murdoch over here, books on atheism over here. These are books where I'm cited in. Or these are books where I'm cited in. Gene Fernald here, famous books. History of Calvin here. Nietzsche collection over here. More books on Egypt over here. More books on Egyptology over here. Religion, Mythology, Buzan's Book of Genius. Books on atheism over here. Sociophysics. More books over here. Vital Forces, C.P. Snow, Lucretius, On the Nature of Things. Goethe's collection over here. More books by Goethe. Elective Affinities and the Critics. Goethe's Autoexistography. More books by Goethe. Ovid's Metamorphosis. More books by Lucretius. Books on tropism and social dimensions of human animals. Life and works of Goethe. Here we see thermodynamics of so-called living things or biology. Gone to Grass, good book on it if you listen to the audio version here. More books over here. History of Thermodynamics. Right here. Thermodynamics of so-called biothermodynamics over here. Genius studies here. Genius studies here. Pauline's general chemistry. Pauline section here. Henry Adams section over here. HMLPD over here. These are recently read books, or at least recently read a year ago, which I read straight through these different books. Hitler's Wave Mechanics explains it's the origin of the hydrogen bond mechanics are explained in here. These are Pierre Teilhard's books, where he tries to explain energy, physics, force via a mixture of Christianity. More books over here. Here we see my Yeoman's Neurosurgery 5-volume set. As I was supposed to have been a board certified neurosurgeon by the time I was 40, but this didn't work out as planned. Some recently read books here. Henry Adams, Spinoza's Ethics, Descartes, good book here. My Newton collection. My Maxwell collection. Part of my Willard Gibbs collection. My Helmholtz collection here. I've got a mixture of books here, Bertrand Russell, Facts and Mysteries in Particle Physics, Heraclitus, Parmenides. Ward's Pure Sociology, pretty good book. Religion, Mythology over here. Cork and the Jaguar. Some random books over here. Christianity Unveiled, So by Holbach. Leibniz's Monel, another Schopenhauer book here. Isaac Beekman, pretty good, very good book here. Cardano's 2-volume book on the subtle things. This is very good here. Chemical Thermodynamics over here. Evolution of Desire, Very good book here. Some more religion, atheism books over here. Machiavelli the Prince is very good. Pascal's Panisi is not very good. Leviathan, pretty good book. This is a good book here, Weiss. This is a very good book here, Bray, The Living Universe. Mad Ridley's Genome, pretty good. The Testament, Gene Mesler, very good book. Riddle of the Universe by Haeckel, very good book. Very good book on the best history on thermodynamics to date. From Watt to Clausius. Pretty good history book here. These are pretty good here. Marquis de Sade on bedroom philosophy. This is pretty good here. If you want to learn why the French fuck women in the armpit, it's pretty interesting. Montaigne's collected works, a lot of good quotes in here. More books on here. History of the Barometer, pretty good book. This is a very good book here. Talks about the origin of the vacuum. Tom Harper's Pagan Christ, very good book. Bruno has some good stuff in here. More books in archive here. I used to have almost 2,000 books, but I had to get rid of a lot of them for certain reasons. More books on thermodynamics here. Originally, my goal is to buy and read through 100 books on thermodynamics. So I just started buying every thermodynamic textbook I could find and started reading through it. More books over here. Bert Magnus talks about the affinities here. Julian Lemaitre is pretty good. Some of your basic dictionaries here. Parrington has the best history of thermodynamics. Asimov is so. Here's Cox's Genius Studies, where she ranks the top 300 geniuses. Physical chemistry, quantum mechanic history here. Pauling on the nature of the chemical bond. This is one of the books that prompted me to write Human Chemistry, when I wanted to write the first book on the nature of the human chemical bond, which I did in the second volume of my Human Chemistry. Some more history of chemistry books here. Thermodynamics. Some of my Feynman books. Thomas Pynchon is sort of interesting. Constitution. Some more history of chemistry. Books on force. Coulson's Valence is another early chemistry book. Galileo, Principles of Quantum Mechanics by Dirac, pretty good book. Here we see Da Vinci books. And to summarize here, eventually, if you're a big genius thinker, you're going to end up back on this book. Gilbert Lewis, Thermodynamics and the Free Energy of Chemical Substance, because you are formed by formation energy. You're going to want to understand how you are formed according to formation energy in this book. And you're also going to want to learn that this came from Clausius's mechanical theory of heat, which was energy and entropy was defined here. And from these, formation energy was defined here. And then over here we have in between Clausius and Lewis's Willard Gibbs on the first he published graphical methods in the thermodynamics of fluids. And we're going to want to read another extension of this geometrical representation of thermodynamic properties of substances by means of surfaces. And then this is the grand poobah of all books on the equilibrium of heterogeneous substances. If by the time, supposedly, almost nobody's been able to fully get this through their head, but this is the most difficult, complex book written to date. And explains the Gibbs free energy is the energy that formed you. And this started with Carnot, Reflections on the Motive Power of Fire. So I went sort of in this order. Carnot was before this, Reflections on the Motive Power of Fire, then Clausius. But before Carnot is this book. Lavoisier and Laplace Published Memoir and Heat. So first it was this one, Lavoisier Memoir and Heat. This is where the heat cycle is defined. But before this, it was elective affinities. Was before this by Torben Bergman. And this is where the first this is where affinity tables came from. And before that, it was Newton, Query 31 in his optics. That launched this book. So if you go to Q for query, first book of optics, got all these queries. Query 27. Query 31. Have not small particles of bodies certain powers, virtues, or forces by which they, at a distance, act at a distance not only on the rays of light before refracting and deflecting them, but also upon one another for producing a great part of the phenomenon of nature. So this is where we explain the phenomenon of all human nature from here, in terms of attractions and repulsions of small particles that scale up to bigger particles. So once you get to Willard Gibbs, then you have to write a treatise on human chemistry. And before that, it was there's a big who did this here before me in 1987. This is 2007 or 852. And then after this, you have to write a treatise on human chemical thermodynamics. So this hasn't been written. Some in the future, this will be written. And then in between, or before, somewhere before this, is Otto von Guericke. And his studies on the vacuum, which is right here. So this was 1672 or 283. So this is before Newton. So now we're up to scale of growth of intellect. So Guericke was the first one to question the existence of the vacuum. Before this, it went back to Aristotle, who said that a vacuum could not be, was impossible. And that goes back to the debates between was Heraclitus versus I can't find it right now. But the question, Guericke was the first one to question the whole thing, and he started doing experiments. He was the first one to make a piston and cylinder a vacuum, and this is where the engine came from. And from the engine, energy and entropy came out of this with Clausius. And energy became formation energy with Gibbs, which is before Lewis. And then it became formation energies applied sociologically with Mirza Big, and then by myself, and then eventually in chemical thermodynamic terms. So I hope you like this summary. Be cool.